Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. I lead the way. Harriet Tubman was born Arminta Ross around 1822 on a tobacco plantation in Dorchester County, Maryland. She and her family were slaves. Slaves were forced to work hard without being paid, and many times they were not treated nicely. One day, as she was working in the field, Harriet overheard her owner bargaining with someone to sell her away from her family and send her to another farm down south. Slaves had no say in where they lived, and many times they were separated from their families and placed on other farms, sometimes close and sometimes far. Most times their owners were paid money for the slaves that they sold, and other times they traded furniture, land, or livestock. She never forgot how sad it was when her two older sisters were sold away. As she said, never to be heard from again. Her parents were very sad about it, but there was nothing that they could do. Arminta decided that she was going to run away from the farm to a place up north where she heard that all people could live free. She wanted that freedom so much that she was willing to take a chance on a dangerous journey to get it. Her husband, John Tubman, who was a free man, didn't want her to go and threatened to tell her owner that she was going to run away. Although John was free, there was still a lot that he couldn't do. Arminta wanted complete freedom. Before she left, Arminta changed her name to Harriet in honor of her mother Harriet, and that is how she became known as Harriet Tubman. She was fearful because running away then was very dangerous, just like it is now. Harriet sang a song that she made up the night before she ran away as she walked past her friends' and relatives' cabins. I'm sorry I'm going to leave you. Farewell, oh farewell, but I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, oh farewell. I'll meet you in the morning. I'm bound for the promised land, on the other side of Jordan, bound for the promised land. Although her slave owner heard her singing, and although he heard the words, he wondered why she was singing so loudly, but she knew that she was saying goodbye to everyone. Harriet Tubman and her two brothers all escaped the plantation together, but her brothers became afraid and decided to turn back. Harriet kept going to freedom. Harriet was very afraid and wasn't sure where to go. Then she remembered some of the code songs that the slaves sang in the fields. These songs sounded ordinary to some, but the slaves knew that they contained codes that would tell them how to get to freedom. Follow the Drinking Gourd was a code song that the slaves would sing. It spoke about looking for the Big Dipper as a guide on your escape. This song also has words telling what time of the year would be a great time to run away, tells them to run along the side of the river, and tells who to meet to help them to cross the river. Harriet looked for signs of people who would help point the way to go on her route to freedom. This network of people was called the Underground Railroad. Each stop or safe location was called a station, and the people were called conductors. One of the signs that she looked for was a lantern hanging in the window inside of a house. This let her know that this was a safe house to approach. At each safe house, she got additional instructions on what she needed to do to continue her journey to freedom. Although Harriet saw the sign of a safe house, she still had to be very careful. She had to be sure that no one saw her so that she wouldn't get captured. A quilt hanging on the fence was a sign of help, but not to come to the house. The quilt gave directions on which way to go. The way that the flying geese quilt is laying shows the direction for Harriet to go when it gets dark enough for her to go without being seen. The bear claw quilt hanging on the fence meant to follow the mountain trail out of view and find food and water left there for her. There were several patterns used to help the runaway slaves. One, which was called the drunkard's path, let them know that people were in the area looking for them, so they needed to go in a zigzag route to keep from being found. When Harriet saw a house with a chimney painted white, it meant that she could speak to the people of that house. She knew that she had to be careful and could not just approach anyone. When Harriet crossed the Pennsylvania state line into freedom, she said, "I looked at my hands to see if I was still the same person. There was such a glory over everything. The sun came like gold through trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. When she arrived in Philadelphia, Harriet found work as a maid and saved her money. She remained in contact with the black and white abolitionists who helped slaves escape on the Underground Railroad. Although Harriet made it to freedom and was living in Philadelphia, she could not rest as long as her family and friends were still slaves. Since she knew what she called the line to freedom, she went back several times and brought as many as she could along with her. She was recruited by the Union Army to help in the Civil War. Due to her knowledge of herbal medicine, she was a nurse along with a cook and clothes washer. Harriet was the head of the spy network due to knowing the supply routes because of the Underground Railroad. She also helped free slaves that immediately joined the Union Army to help win the Civil War. Harriet Tubman was called Moses because she led so many people to freedom. Like Moses in the Bible led the Israelites to the promised land. She gave many speeches on her life and how she helped free so many people. It is said that in one speech she said, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." To receive notifications on all new content added, please subscribe to this channel. If you learned something new today, like this video. Also, go to blackheritagehub.store and buy your Harriet Tubman, I Lead the Way book and accompanying t-shirt. Harriet knew that running away was dangerous, but she was trying to save herself. Today, many people run away because they are angry or sad. It is just as dangerous now as it was then. There are many people that you can reach out to, including relatives, teachers, counselors, and others, but first try and communicate with your parents or guardian.